Good morning, YouTube. It's bright and early, and it's morning science time with Homegrown Big. And this is something that I love to do every day. I typically think about science for most of the day, but I like to read science in the morning and before bed. That's part of my personal routine. And today I want to show you some papers that I've been reading, and I want to illustrate how easy it is to make any claim with science, and with highly reputable science, and with science that's published in peer-reviewed papers. And this is why when you see someone on the internet or in a magazine article making a claim for their persuasive argument and using science, that you really must, as an observer, take it with a grain of salt and look at the whole picture versus one paper. So one of the most common things that we see on YouTube, social media, or the media in general is a vlogger or writer wanting to make an argumentative case for their cause, their belief system, or simply just make sensational clickbait reporting, and they will take one, maybe two publications, medical or scientific, and use it to talk about their thoughts, belief systems, or response to the subject matter. Before I go any further, I want to say that I'm not trying to make any claims with the science that I'm about to present. I'm not making any dietary claims. I'm not making any human health claims. I'm just going to show you the science, and we'll talk about it. Alright, first paper. Now, one of the things that when people are making arguments for science that they often do is they will use only one paper, maybe two. But on any given subject matter, there's literally hundreds of papers, right? So I like to look at meta-analysis a lot, and I think that meta-analysis is a really great tool for understanding what the scientific consensus is at a given time. So a meta-analysis will have some search criteria. Normally they'll even use a research method criteria, and then they will screen hundreds of papers and then run statistics on what the consensus of so many papers are. And it can vary a lot. I read one for this video. I read one paper that screened almost 1,000 papers, but they ended up with only under 100 that met their criteria. So meta-analysis, great tool for looking at a broader context of scientific consensus. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is the truth, but in my opinion, it widens that picture of what you're looking at and gives you a better perspective than a singular paper. So my first paper that I pulled up here was a meta-analysis, because eggs are said to have such a bad reputation, a meta-analysis and systematic review of egg consumption in relation to the risk of cardiovascular disease and diabetes. So taking a look at this one here, the conclusion. This meta-analysis suggests that egg consumption is not associated with the risk of cardiovascular disease and cardiac mortality in the general population. However, egg consumption may be associated with an increased incidence of type 2 diabetes among the general population and cardiovascular comorbidity. That means that people who have diabetes are more likely to have issues with heart disease, and that's what their findings show. So here we have it. General population, eggs not going to kill you of a heart attack, but they could complicate your diet, could make you prone to having type 2 diabetes, and then certainly would increase your risk for heart disease. So here's another meta-analysis. It's animal fat and animal protein intake and colorectal cancer. So one of the things we always hear is that meat's just going to rot in your colon, and then you're going to have cancer, and so on and so on. And this meta-analysis showed that on the basis of the results of this quantitative assessment of available epidemiological evidence does not appear to support an independent association between animal fat intake or animal protein intake in colorectal cancer. This is from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. Okay, so here is another meta-analysis, this time turning the focus to red and processed meat consumption. Two things we're told not to eat, and this is looking at the association of risk of incident coronary heart disease, stroke, and diabetes. And this was a systematic review in meta-analysis, and it included cohort studies. And their conclusion was that consumption of processed meats, but not red meats, is associated with higher incidence of CHD and diabetes. And that they felt that their results highlighted the need for better understanding of the mechanisms behind this and the effects, and for a particular focus on warning the public about processed meats and their health. And here's another meta-analysis where they switched up their search criteria, and they did it only who had more than half a serving a day of red meat and who had less. And they felt that their hypothesis before this meta-analysis is that they would find an association with cardiovascular disease for those who ate more than half a serving of red meat a day. And their meta-analysis of lots of research showed that that was not the case. It went against their hypothesis. And that they didn't actually affect their blood lipids and lipoproteins or blood pressure. And one more review article about dietary cholesterol from physiology to cardiovascular risk. And a review article is a little bit different than meta-analysis, although it's similar in that it looks at a lot of research and kind of writes and draws conclusions about what's currently known. And I really highly recommend this article for anyone who's interested in learning more about cholesterol, dietary cholesterol, and how humans use that in their bodies. This actually had some pretty interesting information, and their conclusion was that the epidemiological data do not support a link between dietary cholesterol and cardiovascular disease, which goes against so much of what you hear in these independent individual reports from people who are basically fear-mongering so many people into having ideas that maybe really aren't what science says. So I want to point out something about cholesterol that a lot of people don't know or don't understand. A huge part of the cholesterol that is in our bodies and that is absorbed into our bodies is actually from bile. And according to this paper, a typical Western diet has a dietary cholesterol intake of approximately 300 to 450 milligrams a day, but that their own endogenous cholesterol from bile is 800 to 1400 milligrams per day. Now, this is interesting, and this is some of the arguments that many scientists are making, is that it's not necessarily the dietary cholesterol that's causing or is the focus of the problem, but it's the absorption of bile cholesterol that is becoming a huge problem. And what blocks the absorption of bile cholesterol? Ding, 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 ding. Fiber. Which leads me to my last paper. And in my last paper, we look at a meta-analysis of dietary fiber intake and the risk of cardiovascular disease. And as you might imagine, their results concluded that with increased dietary fiber, especially those from grains and fruit, we see a decrease in cardiovascular disease risk. Not surprising. So this is just a smattering of research that I could pull up to try to make a claim for my personal case of not feeling good on a vegan diet and returning to animal products. I could say, look, it's right here in the science. Look, this shows that there's no blah, 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 blah. I'm not doing that. And I would warn all of you to be very wary of especially any YouTuber that is trying to make a claim for their personal cause, whether it's pro this or pro that, with using a handful of science papers. It gives us a little bit of insight. The meta-analysis I provide here today show us that there is not a definitive, conclusive opinion from the science community on whether or not X, Y, and Z cause said disease. We're not there yet. The science is still, the vote is out. People are still debating. There's definitely, I have not yet seen a single paper that shows that dietary fiber is bad for you. Okay? Every single research thing on dietary fiber is nothing but it's good for you. And all of the fruits and vegetables are good for you. And we know that they have the antioxidants and the polyphenols and the fiber that helps keep our systems in homeostasis. What I believe, and it's my personal opinion, that we're finding is that they're going to show that without question, plants should predominate your diet. And we know that. I mean, we just know that by looking at the observational studies, by looking at the data that's provided from science. And that is exactly why, in my personal choices in life, I choose to keep plants as the focal part of my daily diet. And in closing, I will also say that as of right now, there is no evidence, scientifically speaking, that veganism is well supported by the median of the human population. Now, I do have papers coming up that will show that, and I'm going to talk more about it, but not on a conclusive, definitive level. I think that it's not wrong for humans to be vegans and to experiment with veganism. There's a lot of people who make really weird arguments saying, oh, it's not natural, or it's not our evolutionary past. Well, how do you think that humans started eating meat in the first place, or started eating that plant over there in the first place that we never ate before, or started making this fruit over here that we never had before? That's our nature. We're experimenters, and it's really common in the animal kingdom for species to experiment with new food sources. And humans come from a time when there was a lot of different walking hominids. There was a hominid that was a specializer in tubers and had been around for 3 million years by our best carbon dating. And humans, modern humans, haven't even hit that level of being on this planet. And we know so little about this particular hominid. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if we are slowly going through speciation again of some sort. That happens, and it takes so long that we really have a hard time observing it. And this was part of how Darwin sort of started thinking about the time scale of life, and that life as we know it, whether it's with humans or trees or snakes, is a really slow process, like geology. Geological process is very difficult to see in real time unless it's, I don't know, like a major mudslide or something. But in general, the slow transformation of continents and landscapes. This happens slowly over time, and our human consciousness has a really difficult time understanding it and being able to really conceptualize it. So that's the end of this video. I hope that this sparks a little bit of conversation. Please leave your comments down below, pro, against. I don't mind. This is an open forum. I ask you to keep it clean though, and hit like and share this around with a few friends. Let's get a broader conversation going. All right, it's time for a workout.